Welcome from Christ the King Episcopal Church and the Point Washington West neighborhood, as I'm here with Christ the King parishioner and vestry member, Lynn Crevar. Good afternoon, Lynn.
Good afternoon, Richard.
First, tell us a little bit about yourself. Where'd you grow up, and perhaps why or when or how did you come to move here?
I grew up in Troy, Alabama, and from there I lived in, let me say this. I grew up in Troy. My family was from Troy for generations. I went off to boarding school in high school to All Saints Episcopal School in Vicksburg, Mississippi. From there, I went to the University of Alabama, so I never really lived in Troy again. And after graduating at Alabama, I lived briefly in Auburn, briefly in New Jersey, and then Atlanta for 25 years, where my children grew up, and Tucson for 8 or 9 years, and I moved here from Tucson. I moved here sort of knowing that my children don't live here or anywhere close to here, would always pivot around Atlanta because that's where they grew up. So that's really the reason I moved down here.
All right. Yeah, a good bit closer to Atlanta than Tucson, Arizona is. So you were in boarding school at All Saints Vicksburg, and kind of a cool connection there is that Father David Luckett, who is the interim priest here in between Father Frank and myself, was the headmaster there for many years. Was he the headmaster when you were a student there?
No, he came after I was gone.
Okay.
But yes, when I met him for the first time at Christ the King and saw his name, I totally recognized it because I got alum stuff from them for years, and I remembered his name on it. So I introduced myself and said I went to All Saints before your day, and he literally said, "Oh, you were one of the girls," and I'm like, "Yeah."
Well,
Yeah.
I went to boarding school as well, so many happy and memories about that, and I'm sure my parents were just as happy that I was gone as I was to be gone. So
I'm here.
Tell me a little bit about your history and relationship with the Episcopal Church in general, and then maybe Christ the King in particular.
I was briefly there. Okay, I've lost you.
You have?
Okay. I got you back. You
Yeah,
won't
so you need to sit
sorry.
closer to the screen and it won't fade out like that. Because when you sit back to the screen, really the screen is the microphone. And so when you're far away from the microphone, it'll clip out, you know? So see if that helps.
I'm close.
Good.
I grew up an Episcopalian. My parents, my father grew up in the Baptist church, my mother in the Methodist. They found the Episcopal church in Troy when I was like 4 or 5 years old. And, nothing like a convert. They went in head first. They were staunch Episcopalians from that day forward. So I grew up in St. Mark's in Troy. And I'll be honest, I didn't go to church much after All Saints. The next time I really went back to church was when my children were little, and I wanted them to go to Sunday school. So I joined St. Martin in the Fields in Atlanta. And then, as they grew up, didn't go back much at all. In Tucson, I went back and went to St. Philip's in Tucson. the way I found Christ the King, I may have told you this before. I was going to St. Andrews in Panama City, and after I moved here, and my daughter came down about 15 years ago to find a place to get married, and I really wanted them to marry in the church and not on the beach. And she came back one day and said, "We found a church, Christ the King. It's down the road from you." And I'm like, "Really?" I wasn't even aware of it. So my first time at Christ the King was them getting married there. And back then they would let you get married there, even though you weren't going. But anyway, that's how I found Christ the King. And then, of course, once Father Frank came, which wasn't too long after that, I have gone to Christ the King ever since, and I love that church.
Well, I'm glad that your daughter found it for you.
And I forget that. I mean, she argued with me not long ago. I said something about the church, and she said, "Remember, I found it." And I'm like, "You did?" And she goes, "Mom, I did." And I started thinking about it. And I thought, "Yeah, she did." That was.
Well, you're in your third and final year on the vestry. And so what has that process been like for you? Have you learned anything in particular about the church or the vestry? And just tell us a little bit about your time on the vestry.
It has been a very interesting process. It never crossed my mind to be on a vestry. And I discussed it with someone, and that might have been you. And yes, it has been a revelation, an eye-opener, and a very interesting and rewarding experience. So this is my third, and I stay impressed with this. I'm in my third group of people, clearly because it's the third year of different people on the vestry. And I think every vestry I have been on, I'm just awed by the hard work, the dedication, the time giving.
Mm-hmm.
It's wonderful. Every year has been, because I still remember the first year and the senior warden when they were gone. I was like, "Oh no, oh no," and the second year was just as great. But mainly my eyes have been opened, and I don't particularly include myself in this, but with the time and work that it does involve,
Mm-hmm.
and with people willing to give of themselves.
Yeah. Well, I think,
Very big eye. I had no idea.
yeah. Well, you've put in the time and work too. And I hope, I mean, what I've seen in the work you've done is it has bared fruit. And so that I think is a good thing when you're working hard and engaging and things are happening instead of just hitting a brick wall and nothing moving or changing. And that kind of carries us to your commission, pastoral care and spiritual formation. And under your watch, I mean, you've had a remarkable time in the stuff that you've started. You've started an active centering prayer group that meets here at Christ the King every Thursday for 20 minutes of centering prayer and then an hour of discussion, whether you're doing a book discussion or a video. And the number of folks who were coming to that prior to the pandemic was enough to really be impressed by, particularly for a startup group. So tell us a little bit about some of that work that you've done, Lynn.
Well, I am so proud of that group, and I started practicing centering prayer, and I have to add, sporadically. A number of years ago, 9 or 10 years ago, someone I'd literally never heard the two words, and someone told me about it. My first experience was at Holy Spirit Monastery in Atlanta. And I've been back there a number of times and have done different retreats, but I've done the centering prayer retreat there more than once. Just an aside, the first time after I went to a centering prayer retreat, and I was at Christ the King, and I was pretty impressed with myself that I had discovered something. And I said to Father Frank, let me tell you what I did. And I told him, and I said, had you heard of centering prayer? He said, I've been doing it for about 30 years. I went, oh, okay, I didn't discover it. You know how you think you've discovered something when you do something.
Right.
Like anyway.
Why didn't you tell me about it?
He said, it's real hard. And I said, yeah, I think it is too. But anyway, I don't know many words to say about it, except it suits me. I'm very inspired by it, and thanks to you and your approval and your approval, I was able, with the help of a couple other people, with Linda Boland and Buffy, to start a group here. We had folks come in from Pensacola that are contemplative outreach over there, which is what we're a part of, and help us, kick it off. And a year ago, March is when we started. Mm-hmm. So I feel good about it. We have got a great group, most of whom were totally new to centering prayer. Mm-hmm. And I have somebody in there with me who is back now. I don't know if you knew this. She came back Thursday, Linda Bowen, for her first time. She has been nowhere since it started. And she really is in depth with contemplative living. Mm-hmm. So I'm fortunate that she knows so many things I don't, that her voice is in there to help with all of that. So yes, yeah. I'm very, very happy that, and you and I've talked about it before, I've been in other centering prayer groups, and we have, though it doesn't seem like many to other people, many groups have 2 and 3 people. So, and if we end up with 2 and 3 people, the 2 and 3 people will come to the church and do centering prayer, but we've got several.
Yeah. Yeah, and we slowed down and actually hit pause on it during the virus time, but we're now back having the centering prayer on Thursdays when we wear masks and sit far apart from one another, exercise those same precautions. Sadly, I haven't been able to join y'all because I don't have childcare on Thursdays in the morning. So since school is out and summer camps are not in session, I'm having to watch the kids on Thursday morning. So, but I'm glad to know that y'all are still doing it, and anybody is welcome. You don't have to be a card carrying contemplative to start, and I'm living
very few of us card carrying contemplative.
Yeah. So I've been very enriched by the centering prayer practice and the discussions we have when I was part of the group before the virus, and commend that to anyone. Tell me this, what has been for you, just as a person, not necessarily as a vestry member, or you can frame it as a vestry member, but just this COVID-19 pandemic, what's been some of the most challenging things for you? How has it affected your life?
Well, Lord, no, it's affected everybody's life so much, Richard, as we all know. Mm-hmm. To be honest, initially, other than the fear of getting sick, or people I know getting sick, or anybody, so many people have died and gotten sick. I was out of work, and I worked retail, so of course where I worked closed. And, my initial concern was that, what am I going to do? How am I going to pay my bills with so many other people in this world that had that feeling. And I was fortunate that um, I made it through that part. And because it's retail, and no, I was afraid to go back, retail opened sooner than anybody else. So
Mm-hmm.
I was out of work maybe, I think about 5 weeks, maybe
Mm-hmm.
6. I don't know if it was 6. Anyway, but I was fortunate to be able to go back to work, and I actually changed jobs. Um, and I've been working ever since. So, and of course that's not the biggest impact, but anytime all of a sudden, your income is gone, that's scary.
Yeah.
Uh, and yet I have to say, because I work because I have to, and I hope I'm conscientious where I work, but would I prefer not to work? Yes. So quite honestly, I loved being at home in the beginning. Now, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it was a terrible reason to be at home, but I didn't mind, as a lot of my friends, who don't work, got bored real quick. And I'm like, I'll never get bored just because I enjoyed, um, trying to do some of the things I don't normally do at home.
Mm-hmm.
But, this world has changed. I think it's going to stay changed, some for the good, maybe. It's, I think like a lot of people, I think about it differently on different days.
Mm-hmm.
Depends on what I heard yesterday. Um, but do I dwell on it most of the time? No, I try
Mm-hmm.
not to. So that's how it's affected my life. But yes, it's I think we're still, all of us, in somewhat disbelief.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, thanks for sharing that. And finally, what are you most excited about for Christ the King in the months and years to come? What do you think is most hopeful and exciting for our life together as a parish?
Well, clearly, the one that jumps out is I'm very excited that we finally got to break ground on the school.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I do see a very bright future for Christ the King, and you are a huge part of that. We have quite a few young people that we never had. And I think your due, um, your presence and your working on that is certainly a tribute to you. I see a bright future for Christ the King because of the young people, because of the school. Um, it's a welcoming, I mean, I've always felt that way. It's a very welcoming, close community in that church.
Mm-hmm.
And the future to me looks bright. A lot of hard work goes into it.
Yeah.
From vestry members and from so many people that volunteer and do things in that church. But I see a bright future. And, I hear that all churches today don't necessarily have a bright future, even Episcopal churches.
Mm-hmm.
So, and of course, this area is growing so much,
Mm-hmm.
which I'm personally not thrilled about, but probably bodes well for things like churches.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yes, I feel very positive about Christ the King.
Good. Well, you know how presidents will give their either State of the Union address or maybe their inaugural address or whatever and they'll be talking and then they'll give a special interest story about a success story about a program that the president has started or whatever, and they'll um, zoom in on the camera to the person who's been invited to come to the crowd and be there, and they'll say, this person is an embodiment of my administration's success story or whatever. Uh, well, you would be invited to my State of the Parish address for a success story, because when I invited you to serve on the vestry, you were very hesitant. You felt underqualified, under worthy or whatever, and you were just who, me? No way. What am I going to bring to the vestry? Am I the best you can do? Has everybody else said no? And I just said, trust me, Lynn, I think you'll be great. And you have. I mean, you've gone from, I think, always loving Christ the King and being involved on some level, but sort of at an arm's distance in some ways. And then you hopped on the vestry and really got this contemplative prayer group going. Our pastoral care outreach has grown, and so much has changed in our life because of you and bringing your passions and gifts to the table. And so I look at you as someone who has really been a great success story. And you
Well,
have
Rick, you are so
tried
sweet to do
yourself.
that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. That is very, very sweet of you.
Yeah. Well, I'm not letting you off the hook yet. You have till December 31st on the vestry. You're not done yet, but we're so grateful for you and for your ministry to Christ the King and our community. And much love and peace, and have a great weekend.
Same to you, Richard. Thank you.
All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.